integrated approach to the way in which we are responding to the challenges presented in our world today by the change in climate. Everyone knows that we have been working on this issue for such a long time, but in the main, I think, all of us have been working in our particular discipline and therefore in our particular silo, working as hard as we can to combat the issues which are challenging us now in relation to climate change. As you know, the Commonwealth is made up of 52 member states from 6 regions, and for more than 31 of those member states, climate presents an existential threat. We had with us Anote Tong, who was the former president of Kiribati, and he expressed so poignantly the struggle that Kiribati has as the sea rises, the level rises, the threat that that poses to the people who live on Kiribati. So the importance of climate has been something that the Commonwealth has been committed to since 1989, vocally. But what we found is that all the different disciplines struggling with this have part of the picture, not all of the picture. And so the big question that was raised for countries right across the Commonwealth, including the small island developing states, because desertification is affecting many of the bigger states. And so the big question was, how do we address this? And could it be possible for us to address it together? And what could we do? Because if we didn't come together, if we don't address it, then our future is very bleak indeed. And many were saying that the damage that we've caused to our environment in the last 200 years was irreversible. And so all we could do was slow down that train to destruction. We couldn't stop it, except, and it was a very important word, except if we came together and drew down the carbon and took it out of the atmosphere where it had been improperly put and put it in to the ground where it really belonged. Because as our atmosphere has got hotter and hotter, what we have seen is that the Earth, which needs the carbon, is losing the carbon and degenerating. So how do we send that carbon home? How do we take it out of the atmosphere and send it back? And what we saw was that if we could combine the things that we were doing, integrate it, we would be able to regenerate our Earth. And so the regenerative approach is the synthesis of all the things that we're doing, not just in the science, but the things that we're doing generally. And what we have come to understand, and Paul Hoken was here with us through his book, Drawdown, it really demonstrates that that which we hoped might be possible is possible. So the science tells us that if we can integrate and synthesize those things, we could potentially reverse climate change by us choosing to do things by 2050 and even perhaps 2045. But it depends on all of us choosing to act together and differently. But the huge welcome fact that comes out of the data, the empirical data, is it is doable. So now it's a matter of choice. So we were launching that whole process, that idea yesterday, to share with all our member states that, one, the things we're doing on the climate change agenda is working. Two, the fact that we have committed ourselves in both the Sustainable Development Goals and, more importantly, for the members of the Commonwealth, to the Commonwealth Charter, all the things that we said we were going to do in relation to education, in terms of empowering women, looking at poverty, looking at the health dynamic, looking at housing, all those things which we had already committed to, which we were already doing, make a positive contribution to regenerating our world, regenerating our communities, and makes it more possible that we will reverse climate change. And it was wonderful to see that the empowerment of women and girls was one of the most powerful things to regenerate our world, and we're already doing it. So it's an opportunity to look at what we're doing, which raises our hope levels, because it's great to know we are on the right track, to know that what we're doing in terms of bringing down CO2, we're on the right track, to see people who've been working on all the different forms of green technology coming together and seeing how they could help each other. Finding that Janine Benyus has graphically described the benefit of imitating nature. For 200 years, we human beings use the genius which is within our intellect to develop new technologies. But in our arrogance, we thought we didn't have to look at nature. We didn't have to learn from nature because we could do it ourselves. What have we learned? That actually we don't know as much as we think. But if we look at the R&D of nature, which has been developed over billions of years, and if we have the humility to analyze what nature does, how nature does it, and imitate it using that same human genius to observe, then we together with nature can heal the damage that we created. But also it was very interesting to see how permaculture has had an impact, because what we also see is that some of the things that we have done as human beings has actually impacted on nature in a positive way. So that some of that interaction now means that we can take some of the solutions as a result of what we've done historically and use them to heal some of the aberrant things that we did in the past. It's exciting to know that as a result of mimicking nature, we've understood how coral works to clear CO2. We've understood what trees do in spring and in summer to use CO2 creatively as a food stuff. So the tree takes the CO2, puts it through the branches, uses it as the basis to grow the leaves, and then sinks the carbon into the ground, and the carbon enriches the ground and makes it fertile and fruitful. That opportunity to merge what coral does, to look at what trees do, has enabled our brilliant scientists to come up with carbon-eating concrete. So that if we were to build our new buildings from this carbon-eating concrete, every building made from that would become a carbon sink. So carbon sequestrations. So when trees go to sleep, we have buildings which continue to do that work. And there's no point in saying we human beings will no longer live in buildings and we don't want to have the sort of benefits we have today, because it's not realistic. People do want to live in warm, centrally heated or cooled buildings. It's what we've got used to. So the real question now is, how do we do the same thing, but do it smarter? Do it in a way that nature does it. So the same biologists have been looking at termite mounds. How do termites build mounds that generate such heat, and yet inside the termite mound it's so cool? And copying the termite mound means we now have cooling systems based on the science created by termites. We've looked at how to re-irrigate land, and we've known that if you now look at what our traditional farmers were doing and understand that traditional farming, it re-irrigates land and can turn land that's a desert back into green, usable land. And again, they looked at how you put holes and create pools of water, and the fact that if in those pools of water you have trees growing near to each other, the trees create a network which helps the regeneration of an area, and to understand that the plants and the trees work in communion with each other. And although we have traditionally been thinking they are separate and apart, the ecosystem is interconnected. And we weren't watching, we weren't understanding, but now that we are watching and we are understanding, we're learning so much more. So it's the challenges themselves which have forced us to come up with new ways. Would we now have electric cars if it hadn't been said that we really couldn't continue to have gas guzzlers ruining the atmosphere? Would we really now be contemplating an electric aeroplane flying without fuel if we hadn't been forced to think about how we use carbon fuels and the disadvantage of global warming? It has made us much more creative. We have to be ingenious and innovative to overcome the problems that our genius created. And that's a very exciting opportunity for technical and other development for our young people. 60% of the Commonwealth is below the age of 30. We need jobs for our young people. We need hope and aspiration for our young people. And this new green technological revolution is going to create jobs that have never been thought of before. And we are going to have to train our young people to be ready for that new world. And many of us who were born before the 1970s, let me be kind to myself, we would never have dreamt of a world where we're all carrying around a computer the size of a planet in our hands. We wouldn't have thought that we might be talking to each other directly across millions of miles to be able to see and speak to each other. These revolutions would have been fantastical in the 1950s, yet they're everyday occurrences now. The development in the last 20 years, I think, has probably been faster than the development in the last 200 years. So we can reasonably anticipate that by 2030, by 2050, we will be doing things that we never dreamt possible. But in order to get there, we are going to have to change our mindsets, change our language, and to see that some of the things that have been done are challenges, but they are also opportunities that can, if we choose to work together collectively, to take as our template the Sustainable Development Goals, to think and use our creativity in a much more dynamic and interesting way, we can build a world which is even more wonderful than it is today. But it will take all of us working together, planning, plotting together, and choosing to adopt a regenerative model which is not based on fear, but is sufficiently understanding of what we have done, what we are capable of doing, and what we will choose to do as a community to be the difference we want to see in the world. And I am so proud to be the Secretary General of this wonderful Commonwealth, because our 2.4 billion people are our real gold. And together, all the cultures, because in our Commonwealth we have people from every race, every religion, every culture, every orientation. We have people of every age group. We have people of every religion. But also we have land masses of every type. We have island states, large states, landlocked states, rich countries, poor countries, medium income countries. So when our 52 come round the table and talk to each other and listen to each other and plan together and care about each other, that symbiosis is something which is quite extraordinary, because it is a family of nations who can choose to create a pathway that others across our world might choose to follow. Because when you look at the faces of the members of the Commonwealth, the rest of the world sees themselves reflected in us. And that is a very special position for us to be in. And it's one which I know the 52 member states take very seriously indeed. But we are going to need help. We're going to have to harvest our resources in a way that will enable us to do this. And I'm incredibly grateful to Australia, who is currently the sole country supporter for our climate change financial access hub. And that's enabling us to have a hub of financial advisors and expertise in Mauritius, with spokes in each of the regions. But we are starting now to put financial climate change advisors in the small countries in particular who have asked for that assistance. But of course we don't have sufficient money in our Commonwealth technical assistance budget for all the requests that are being made. But we know through the generosity and the pro bono and other help that it's possible that we would be able to help everyone who needs it. But again, that's going to take all of us standing up to the plate, walking the talk, and maybe putting our money where our mouth is.